Well, okay. Welcome, everyone, this evening. Um, I'm David Dundee. I'm Director of Education here at Telus Museum. And just as I always do, just wanted to tell you about some upcoming events here at the museum. Our next sci-fi night will be on December 1st, and it'll be the Journey Through Time, Enchanted World of Fossil Amber. And these will be some high-resolution images of trapped creatures that are about 12,000 years old in amber. And I've seen the images. They are amazing, some of the detail that you'll see. And this is the precursor to the opening of our amber exhibit that night. So I hope you can come back for that. Also, on December 12th, 9th, and 10th, our next big event here at the museum, we'll have our holiday PJ party. Santa will be here both Saturday and Sunday. And my favorite part, we'll also have the Festival of Trains. And so we'll have train layouts throughout the museum. And this year we're featuring N-Gauge, for those of you who know what that is, in our Great Hall, as also Lego trains and some other larger trains will be running in the museum. So you can come and see all those layouts. There's a scavenger hunt to find things. It's going to be just a splendid weekend. Coming up in our Lunch and Learn series at 12:15 in the afternoon, we have on November 29th how to buy a telescope. If you're thinking of buying a telescope this year, it will feature me talking about how to buy a telescope, to all the ins and outs. And then on December the 20th, our science team will be doing a interactive science demonstration all about snow, something we probably won't see this year in Georgia, but don't jinx it. Okay, all right, we have an optimist out there. But anyway, also, if you're interested in our observatory, it will our Stellar Astronomy Workshop is on November 17th, something you have to sign up for ahead of time, and it's kind of a fun workshop. You get to use the observatory and some other things that go on with our astronomer that night. And also, tomorrow, we have our Solar Skywatch. The observatory is open tomorrow to look at the sun, and it's open tonight. And I highly recommend, after the talk, to go out to the observatory. Jupiter is at opposition, which means it's exactly opposite the sun today, and so it means it's a mere 33 light minutes away, so it's fairly close to the Earth, well, in Jupiter terms anyway, but it's really bright, and the moons of Jupiter, because of the sun angle, are particularly bright, so it's really pretty. And also Saturn will be up tonight too. So we also have a planetarium show, which goes at 8 o'clock right after this talk, if you're interested. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. We have a great honor to have Dr. Tim Lieuwen with us today. The Georgia Tech Research Institute has been a tremendous supporter of this museum with talks, with activities, and this is just one of the many things that they do for us. And Dr. Lieuwen is a Regents Professor, a David S. Lewis Jr. Professor, and Executive Director of the Strategic Energy Institute at Georgia Tech. He manages the Georgia Tech overall strategy and external relations for 315 faculty, over 1,000 researchers in R&D, and he is the founder and CTO of Turbine Logic, an analytic firm working on energy industry. Professor Lieuwen is international authority on clean energy propulsion, and his work has contributed to numerous commercialized innovations in energy and aerospace. He has authored 4 books, 400 publications, and current and past board positions, many board positions with Oak Ridge and Northwest National Lab, and it's quite a long list of things. He's got many, many awards from the National Academy of Engineering and too many awards to go on about, but he really is a highly acclaimed scientist. And since I contacted Tim back in May with this idea of doing a talk about hydrogen, no less than 7 major articles have appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about hydrogen, with headlines like, "Is Hydrogen Highway in Georgia's Trucking Future?" The DOT eyes potential hydrogen to power commercial vehicles. Georgia Tech research hydrogen fuel engines, which I'm sure Dr. Tim is well aware of. And then one after the other, Biden administration is to award $7 billion nationally for hydrogen hubs across the U.S. And then the following day, the next headline that appears is Georgia loses the bid for becoming a hydrogen hub. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that was in there. And then most recently, just a week or so ago, is hydrogen fuel of the future, is the fuel of the future, or will it crash and burn? So all of that to introduce our speaker tonight, talking about this evolving energy sector. So without any further ado, let's welcome Dr. Lieuwen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for having me. We'll just keep this real easy going. I think we have time for questions at the end, but if there's a burning question that you have right in the middle, just feel free to pop your hand up and away we go. So yeah, I just talk a little bit about, David asked me to talk about hydrogen, but I think before I can talk about hydrogen, I thought I would talk more generally about what's happening in energy, what's the world of energy look like today, and where's it going? And energy is one of those things that's like air. You don't really think about it until you don't have it, right? It's just so ubiquitous. You know, there's, like I put it here, it factors in all kinds of different ways in our daily life. I mean, it makes our civilization possible. If you just think about, if you couldn't use your car, if you didn't have electric power, if you didn't have lights, if you didn't have heating and cooling, if you couldn't use your stove, all that stuff, just your life would look very, very, very different. But it also affects us in lots of other ways, right? I mean, just there's a lot of, nations and drama, political, geopolitical drama, and energy plays a really big role in that. And just, that volatile regions of the world have a lot of the oil that we rely on for driving our cars, and so that drives a lot of interest in, energy has a huge impact on our climate and our environment. I live in Atlanta, and in the summer if you look at Atlanta, you'll see this red layer, and that's smog coming from car exhausts. And so, and we'll talk a little bit about climate change. It appears that just all the energy in our energy systems are actually changing the planet and affecting the planet. And so that's another big factor. And then I'll just jump to this last one, is jobs. There's millions of jobs. I don't know. Possibly some of you in this room have a job which is definitely tied up, and there's massive trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure in the U.S. associated with our energy systems. And so I mentioned this before, but just the United States is blessed in many, many ways, and one of the ways is that we just have a lot of energy, and it's really inexpensive, and it's really low cost, and it just enables so much. What's this thing? By the way, I'm going to ask questions. So this thing on the top left, what's that? It's an air conditioner, right? So I mean, I've lived in Atlanta. I'm from Ohio. I'm a Midwesterner, and I think I've lived in Georgia for 25-ish years. I think the population's doubled, and if we didn't have low-cost energy and didn't have air conditioners, I'll bet you the population of Georgia wouldn't have doubled, right? It would look really differently. Yeah. So just, and if you've ever been to Arizona, like Phoenix, Arizona, like it gets 130 degrees there, and you fly over it, and there's grass and golf courses. Where's that coming from? It's from they're pumping water, out of the Colorado River, and those water pumps take power, and that's all driven by energy. That middle thing, there's lights in there, lighting. It's a lot, this room, we have lights. That's just think about how it just sort of changes. We don't rise when the sun rises and go to bed when the sun sets, like people have done for eons because of lighting. That top right picture, I just flew on one of those today. Airplanes, these things are pretty cool. But a modern airplane is a super, super powerful device. Just taking off a big Boeing airplane is enough power to do a lot of things. And then you just think we can jump on an airplane and we can go all over the place. Or that car, same deal. Just, I popped in my car to get up here, and just think about if I had to, I don't know, walk or ride my bike or whatever. That bottom right image, what's that? That's a refrigerator. Now just think about what refrigerators have done to our way of life, right? Just rather than having to kill the hog and salt it and smoke it and make the cheese and make the sauerkraut from your cabbage and live through that all winter. I mean, we can still certainly do that, but we won't live and die. Because we have freezers, we have refrigerators, and things like that. And then this bottom left, what I'm trying to show there is there's this huge hidden sector that uses a lot of energy that we call the industrial sector. And this is, what I'm trying to show here is concrete. Just think about what our world would look like without concrete. And concrete takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to make, or agriculture, or making glass, or all that stuff. So anyway, just the general point is low cost, reliable energy. It's foundational, and we use a lot of energy. So this is the world. This is a little bit of a graphic, and what you will see. Let's see if you can see this laser point. This is the Burj Khalifa. Anybody know what the Burj Khalifa is? It is the tallest building in the world. I've never been there. It's in the United Arab Emirates. It's 830 meters tall. What's that? About, see if I can do math on the fly here. What's that, about 2,500 feet tall or something? That's the tallest building in the world. This is how much coal we use in the world in a year. So you could basically, and this is a cube. So, right? Or this is how much gas we use, and that's if we turn into a liquid. So it's 1,000 times more volume if you showed it what is a gas. I mean, and that's crude oil. So these are just massive sectors. And when you start talking about these energy sectors, we use numbers like trillions of dollars, and I can't visualize what $1 trillion is. And I mean, I think the average income of a Georgian is probably somewhere around $50,000 per year. So maybe one way to think about it is if $1 million is enough money to put 20 Georgians to work in a year, right? And so that means $1 billion is enough money to put 20,000 Georgians to work for a year. So you think 20,000 people working, that's what $1 billion does. $1 trillion means 20 million, lots more than we have Georgians. So 20 million people working in a year. So if you just think 20 million people working for a year, that's what $1 trillion is. And the U.S., we probably have $20 trillion of sort of existing assets today. And these assets, they're going through some big changes, and that's some of the things that I want to talk about. Another way to think about it is, again, these energy systems are really big, so this web diagram here on the bottom right, you will notice the United States, and those are U.S. natural gas pipelines. Anybody want to take a wild guess how many miles of natural gas pipelines we have in the U.S.? Just take a wild guess. Is it 1,000 or more? Is it 10,000 or more? Is it 100,000 or more? How about 1 million? 1 million miles, that's a long ways. We have about 2.4 million miles of pipelines in the U.S. 2.4 million, that's a lot. You can see that web. And then over here, this is another map of electric lines, transmission grids. Again, millions of miles of power lines running around this country. So really, really big systems. And That's kind of in the U.S., but if you'd say, okay, if we just sort of take all the things that people in the United States use and we just divide it out, what's the average person use? It's another nice little graphic that illustrates how much fuel sort of the average American uses, and how much just stuff, like sulfur. If you ever want to know how much sulfur you use, what does it say? How did you all know that you used 66 pounds of sulfur this past year? But you can see over here that the average, sort of, if you just take what it takes to run our country and just give us our way of life, 6,500 pounds of petroleum. That's a lot. Or 9,500 pounds of natural gas. And don't forget that 0.15 pound of uranium. So it just gives you a feeling for how dense nuclear power is. But yeah, so that gives you kind of a feel for just how big these systems are, sort of at a macro scale, but then even just as everyday Americans just doing our thing, get in the car, taking a shower, eating. It takes farmers to grow the wheat and to grow the cow and raise the cow and to fly the airplane and to extract whatever the stuff is. So yeah, lots. So it just gives you a feel. There's a lot going on in the background, so under the hood, so to speak, that makes this whole thing tick. So I'm going to now throw a few more. Since I'm a professor, I have to throw some complicated diagrams. At least I only have 2 of these. So anyone ever seen one of these before? So you have? Do you know what it's called? Good work. We sometimes call this a Sankey diagram. Yeah, good. And it shows you sort of how energy flows around in our economy. All right? So on the left, it is where all the energy to make this country go comes from, all right? And on the right, it shows you where all that energy is going, okay? And then in the middle, it shows you sort of how it's getting there. So for example, and by the way, the units of this are quadrillion, so that's even more than a trillion, right? So we have a million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. So this is a quadrillion BTUs. So our country uses about 100 quadrillion BTUs of energy per year, British thermal units. And so you can see sort of how it's divided up. You can see where the crude oil is, so about 38 of that. And you can see biomass. You know what biomass is? Well, biomass is any sort of natural biological material. In the state of Georgia, that could be chicken poop. Chicken poop you can make fuel out of that. I don't know if you knew that. It's like amazing. You can take chicken poop, run it through something, and out comes gasoline. You can drive your car. It's phenomenal. It's like modern day alchemy. Instead of gold, we turn. Anyway, I'll stop there. So, and then fossil gas. So that's natural gas, and you can see coal, and you can see uranium. We use a lot of nuclear power in this country, and then tiny little thing right there. That's solar energy. So you guys have some solar power plants out front. And then you can see hydro, so that would be a hydropower plant. Lots of big hydropower plants out west. There's smaller ones in Georgia. And then this is wind power. So you have some small, very small wind turbines out front. Modern wind turbines are huge, size of a football field or 2 football fields. So that's what it looks like today. And if you want to say, okay, there's just too much going on here to understand, let me just unpack this for you and say, and I'm going to get to hydrogen, by the way. So this is a long-winded intro to hydrogen. But if you'd say, okay, what is this energy system? How's it all unpack it? Well, like I said, on the left-hand side are energy sources, and on the right-hand side are things that use energy. And there's really 3 big buckets, by the way. There's the industrial sector, like I mentioned, concrete, steel, agriculture, and then there's transportation, so cars and then buildings, so lighting and heating and cooling. But also just as important, which we oftentimes don't think about, is energy carriers and storage. So in other words, how are we moving this energy around from where we make it to where we use it? So, and then also how do we store it? How do we store that energy? And that's all part of this whole thing. So if you just wanted some general numbers, so it said that plot that I showed you, that diagram I showed you earlier, was a little too messy. If you'd say, okay, well, roughly what is that, about 5, 6, or 83% of the primary energy that makes our country go is what we call fossil fuels. So that is something that comes out of the ground. It used to be a plant millions of years ago, and it's been cooking away, and it's turned into coal or oil or something like that. And in terms, but fuel is not only a source of energy, it's also a way of storing energy and moving energy around. Sometimes it's easy to forget that, but you need a way to get the energy from point A to point B, right? And so a lot of, for example, we get a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia. And so there's a lot of energy there in the ground. How does it get there? Well, they put it in a tanker. And so the oil is what we would call an energy carrier. It's also a way of storing energy, right? So you can store it. A big tanker full of oil has carrying a lot of energy. The U.S. has something called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is oil that is underground in big caverns. Massive, it's basically a massive battery. Or we have those 2 million miles of natural gas pipelines. Those are huge batteries, huge places where that energy is being stored. And the reason I'm going to explain to you why I'm emphasizing this, because our energy systems are changing, and what our sources of energy today, our energy system, our sources, our carriers, and our storers of energy are all the same. But those are going to get separated. The things that we get our energy from, and the way we store our energy, and the way we move our energy could all be different things. So we have to think about it a little bit differently. Okay, and then where do the other energy sources? So like I said, most of it comes from fossil, but about 3% comes from renewables, about 9% from nuclear, and 5% from biomass. And then if you'd say, okay, well, how's energy actually being delivered to people who are going to utilize it? So like I said, about 70% comes from fossil, but then electricity is responsible for about a fifth, about a little bit more than 20%. And so electricity is an energy carrier, right? Electricity is not a source of energy. It is a way of moving energy around. You move energy around. And electricity is a pain in the neck to store, by the way. And so our country, actually the modern grid, is a wonderful marvel, because if I were to go flick the light off in this room, some power plant would make a micro adjustment in the amount of power, because the supply of energy and the use of energy matches pretty much every second in time. It's matching. And the grid frequency, which is 60 hertz in the US, if they don't exactly match, that frequency is moving around a little bit. And so plants are always pushing to keep it at 60 hertz. And that's how they do that. But I mean, just think about any other commodity that makes society go, where what you consume at any given instant is exactly what you produce. Like, I don't know, strawberries. Imagine that the strawberries on your table, as you're eating them, were just being produced. Or, I don't know, bread, right? Think about if the bread you made came off the farm that very instant you were eating it. I mean, that's just not, I mean, right? We're used to, you grow wheat, it goes in a big silo, it's stored months and months later, and you just you can decouple the production of wheat and when you utilize it. But electricity is this crazy thing that it exactly matches every instant in time. It's magic. Lots of interest in figuring out how we can store electricity better, because, well, I'll explain that to you in a minute. And then the balance actually comes from what I would call renewable fuels. So rather than fossil fuels, the things that come out of the ground, things that like biofuels, you can actually take pine trees and you can turn them into a liquid fuel, or you can take, just like I said, chicken poop, you can turn into a liquid fuel. And so that's where the balance comes from. So that's what the world looks like today. But this energy system is changing a lot, and it's changing for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is because it turns out that the costs of solar energy and wind energy have come way down, and so our society has basically been built on fossil fuels, which have for a long time been the lowest cost source of energy. But in some cases, wind and solar are actually less expensive. But there's also a lot of conversations about this because of our climate's changing. And so I put on this top of the slide, I said, climate change is very real. How many of you don't buy that? So do I have to convince anybody? And this is one of these things that's kind of gotten politicized, but it's pretty straightforward, actually. it's pretty straightforward, but it's also complicated, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So this plot right here shows you, back to 800, how much carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere. So we talk about carbon dioxide and carbon intensity. And it just turns out that for kind of crazy reasons, because of the sun that we have and the temperature of the sun and when it's where it radiates, that carbon dioxide in our atmosphere actually just absorbs solar energy, makes it hotter. So it's pretty simple. But you say, well, if it's so simple, why is there so much argument about whether climate change is real and whatnot? And the reason it's more complicated is because if our planet was just a big, solid rock, it'd be very simple. You know, that it's got carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. As the carbon dioxide goes up, more solar energy gets absorbed. If it went down, less would be absorbed. But that's not what our planet is, right? We have caps on the end. We have polar ice caps. So it's colder because there's the solar energy is less intense. We have big oceans, right? And those big oceans can absorb some of that carbon dioxide that our energy systems are putting out there rather than them going into the air. And if the ocean's temperature changes, it changes the cloud cover. And if the cloud cover can change how much energy gets absorbed too, or if a big volcano blows off a lot of ash into the air, it blocks how much. So all this stuff makes the details really complicated, and there's all these different feedbacks, and the simple fact is we don't have computers that are big enough to capture all that messy, complicated stuff that's going on. But the basic reality is, when you got more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it absorbs energy. The details, really messy. But anyway, all these fossil fuel systems that I showed you here, right there, every time you burn that, it puts carbon dioxide in the air, which causes the planet to warm up. Now, the planet has been warmer in the past. The planet has had even more CO2 than this in the past. The difference is we have 9 billion people now, and when things change, we know that 10,000 years ago, I came from Cincinnati, Ohio, where where the big ice sheet stopped, the last ice age, 10,000 years ago. So we know that, the planet's changed a lot in the past, but now you're talking about potentially having to move billions of people around, and people own property, and they don't necessarily want someone to live in their backyard, so it just creates a lot of stress. We also know that, it just makes things like, hurricanes, they're more intense now than they were even 20 years ago, just because of this. So anyway, but because of this, all that fossil fuel utilization, it's changing our planet. And so lots of interest in saying, okay, how do we make a plan? How do we have an energy system, just massive energy system that I talked about? How do we make something that doesn't put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? So we call that a net zero CO2 system, all right? So what would our United States look like if we had a system that didn't make CO2? And I'll talk about it a little bit more detail, but we would have energy sources that are renewable energy sources. So rather than consuming something that's expendable, like a fossil fuel, there's only so much of it and then it's gone. Whereas something that's renewable, like solar energy, or at least which works as long as we have the sun, or wind energy. But how this thing could work would be, well, you can continue to have fossil fuels, and as I'll talk about, we're going to be burning fossil fuels for decades. We're going to work on burning them more efficiently so we don't make as much pollution with them and as much carbon dioxide. But the other thing that we'll be doing is we'll be capturing the carbon dioxide that comes out of the exhaust. So in other words, you capture it, and then you just pump it back underground where it came from. The United States has, it's not obvious to us, but to geologists, we have more underground storage than any other continent in the world. Massive. We can store all the carbon dioxide we want. You just pump it back underground. You cap it, just like today, there's all this oil underground and all this natural gas underground. So that's what that looks like. Then you also have those renewable fuels. And this is, so David asked me to talk about hydrogen. This is where hydrogen pops up, is because you have these energy sources, but you still got to get that energy to the users. And, well, you could just do that exclusively via electricity. The problem, like I mentioned earlier, is that electricity is really hard to store. And when you burn a fossil fuel, these are what we call dispatchable. So you can turn a power plant up, you can turn it down. People use more power when they come home from work and they turn on their stoves. And so then the power plants all ramp up. They go to bed, turn the temperature down, power plants ramp back down. That's what we call dispatchable. Renewable sources are non-dispatchable. So they do whatever they want to do, right? So the wind blows when it blows, doesn't blow when it doesn't blow. The sun shines during the day, doesn't shine at night. When there's a cloud, you get less sun, and so forth. And so you get this big matching problem where you have to figure out, okay, there's this massive, there's so much solar energy on this planet. It's huge. It just isn't necessarily available when you want it. So you got to figure out how am I going to store it and how am I going to move it around? Well, one way to do that is through other energy carriers. So electricity is an energy carrier, but so is any other fuel that you manufacture. So you can, for example, make hydrogen, and hydrogen is, you can take water, for instance, and maybe some of you have done this. If you run electricity through water, you call that you split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you can take that hydrogen and you can use it you can pump it underground and you can use it to store it, or you can put it in a pipeline. But it's an energy carrier, so that's where this thing shows up. And so, really messy. So I'm just going to show this to you, and then I'll go to something a little bit simpler. But if you say, what would a net zero energy society look like? This is that same Sankey diagram, but this is sort of a prognostication of if we wanted to get to putting no CO2 into the atmosphere in as least cost way as possible. This is a pretty educated guess on what that would look like. Where again, the left is where that energy is coming from, and then the right is where it's going, and then the middle is all that plumbing and wiring. Remember, all those wires and pipelines that's moving the energy around. And there's a lot more plumbing and wiring. It gets a little bit more complicated. But what I'll do here is I'll just summarize this right here, which just shows you kind of how that system has to change. And so what you'll see is the biggest change is that renewables, which is basically wind and solar, went from 3%, what it is today, to more than half. Big, big bucket. But again, those renewables, they're non-dispatchable. You can't tell them what to do. They're going to work when they can. They're not going to work when they can't. So you need a way of storing that energy. And then we'll still have some nuclear energy. We'll still have biomass. And then also fossil fuels there. Fossil fuels, it's not going away. We're going to continue to use it. The other thing about this is where those energy carriers are. And actually, just to make this a little bit simpler, here's this next slide. I just kind of rounded the numbers. Is how's the energy actually getting delivered to the people who are going to use it? Well, today, electricity is about 20%. But it's going to, so a lot of things are going to get electrified. About half the energy is going to be ultimately used via electricity. So that's going to be electric cars. If you go to Home Depot, now you can buy an electric chainsaw. You can buy an electric leaf blower powered by a battery. And that's all showing up there. And so we're going to be using electricity a lot more. So we're going to need a lot more copper wires and things like that. We're also going to continue to use fossil fuels. Like I said, so about a quarter of the energy is going to be delivered by fossil fuels, but we're going to be using carbon capture. So big things to pull that out of the plant exhaust. And then you got this massive new sector, what I've called renewable fuels. So these are fuels or chemicals that they're not naturally occurring like fossil fuels. We don't just pull them out of the ground. We manufacture them. And then we use that to carry the energy. And so a big chunk of that will probably be hydrogen. So again, hydrogen is not a source of energy, but it's a way of delivering energy to the user. And so this is my last slide, but bottom line is these energy systems are going to look really different than what it is today. How many of you know where the biggest power plant near here is? What is it? Yeah, Plant Bowen. Do you know how big it is? Okay. The closest one to where I live is Plant McDonough, and it's about 2 gigawatts. Powers about 1.7 million Georgians. It may be bigger than Bowen. I can't remember. But anyway, but they're pretty concentrated facilities, right? They're small. If you don't drive by them, you don't realize how that, like for example, in my case, right down the street from me is Plant McDonough, powers 1.7 million Georgians, and it's whatever it is, a half square mile by a half square mile or something like that. And if you're outside of that, it's just not there. Whereas that top right image shows wind turbines. So how many of you have driven around a place where there's a lot of wind turbines? It's pretty amazing, right? Yeah, and my wife is from Eastern Washington, which actually looks a lot like that. And so we've been married for 28 years. And when we were first married, we would drive around in the country, and it was just country. And now there's wind turbine after wind turbine after wind turbine. It's just a completely different landscape. You know, if you're driving in Oregon or California or just places where that are windy, and there's a lot of wind. Or here, does anybody know what those are? Solar cells. Yeah, these look different too, right? I mean, these are, and so if you took, for example, the plant McDonough example that I just gave, which powers 1.7 million Georgians, if you said, you know what, we don't want that plant. We want it to be a solar, and we just blew it up and we replaced it with solar farms. I'm going to make some numbers up because I haven't done the calculation. But you'd probably have enough power for 1,000 Georgians, maybe less. So the energy density is just orders of magnitude smaller. So it just takes a lot more land, right? And so then you got farmers asking, well, is this really what we want to do with our land? Do we want? So you know, I was out in California, and I was in this beautiful valley, and I saw signs, you know, hey, we don't want agriculture to leave our valley. We want solar farms. So these are tough questions we have to think about as a society, just because it's just going to look really different. That bottom right, I saw that you have a couple of these that tell us is, you know, cars potentially running all electric, and that's a whole interesting issue in and of itself. But you know, then you got to make sure that you have these take batteries, which you know have a different kind of range. And you know, one of the challenges that we're having is that you know these batteries are heavy. They don't necessarily have the same range as gasoline, but it looks different. And then on the top here, I have hydrogen. You know, our governor, Dave actually read the one of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is that there is some interest from our governor in having a big hydrogen hub potentially near the Port of Savannah, where you use hydrogen. Again, hydrogen is not a fuel; it's not an energy source, but it's a nice, convenient way of moving energy around and storing it, and so forth. So, anyway, I think that's my last slide, and I will stop. And yeah, happy to chat or take questions, or if you want to disagree with something I said, we can talk about it. But thank you. All right.
If you have a question, raise your hand because we are recording this. So.
We have one right here. Was it Eva? Do I remember that right? All right, Eva. Ellen. Ellie and Eva. Thank you. Okay.
So what happens if we hypothetically ran out of fossil fuel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what's going to happen if we run out of fossil fuels? So we have a decent idea. We have a lot of fossil fuels. We've got hundreds of years of coal, even at our current use. We have decades of natural gas. We have tons of oil. So we're not just going to run out. But what's going to happen is, if as these things start to run out, prices go up, and people start using less of it. But as prices go up, that also means areas that aren't economical to drill for it start to become economical. So if we wanted to use fossil fuels, we could probably just keep piling on and going for the next century. I don't think it's a good idea to do that, but we could if we wanted to. All right.
I was interested to know if we've done any kind of research about possibly using methane for fuels. I know that there's concerns about how much CO2 it emits. I know it's roughly 2 times what we get from natural gases and propanes. But I'm curious to why we don't use it, because we are burning it as it comes out of our landfills. If you go past any one of our landfills,
yeah.
I mean, it's coming out of a pipe and it's burning anyway. So why don't we use that as a fuel source? If it's already going to be burnt, if it's already releasing the CO2, why not use it for something that's useful?
Yeah, good question. So, okay, but natural gas is almost pure methane. Not quite, but when you say natural gas and methane, it's almost one-to-one the same thing. But I mean, we waste a lot of natural gas or a lot of methane. Something that's kind of scary, if you Google satellite image of the United States at night, and you look at that satellite picture, and you're like, and you see, you can see Atlanta, big lights, and you can see the highways sprawling out, and you can see Chicago, and you're like, what's that big city out in the middle of North Dakota? And it's not a city, it's flaring natural gas, and you're like, wow, that's nuts. So it's a horrible thing. It's a waste of energy, and it's dumping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The challenge is that these gaseous fuels are, unless you got a pipeline, it's hard to, you sort of need a pipeline to get them out of there. And so what's most landfills now, they don't release the natural gas or flare it. They have a small power plant or something that's happening there. I think that's largely the case in the U.S., but there is still some flaring, and they're trying to get rid of it. But the reason that they do it is, you'd say, well, why are you wasting the natural gas? It's because you get about 10 times as much. The U.S. market will pay you about 10 times as much for oil than it will for natural gas. And if you've got an oil well, the natural gas that's coming out of it is just a pain in the neck. And you just want to get it out of there so you can get the oil. Because the oil you can put in a truck and you can ship it, whereas the natural gas is harder to move. But that's why, just pure economics. If that well, for example, where they're flaring that natural gas, if there was a natural gas pipeline, they'd for sure be piping that in there.
Blurted out a second question. So basically, if there was an easier way or a cheaper way for them to store it and move it down the road, then it wouldn't be as much of a waste.
That's right. We'd be using it. I mean, the U.S., the biggest source of electricity in the United States comes from burning natural gas. And so, yeah, if you could put it in the pipeline, it's real money. Yep.
All right. Question over here.
So in capturing the CO2, is there a functionality component to that? What do you do with the CO2 that's been captured?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you could figure out a good way to use it, you could retire a gajillionaire. So, there's like, what do we do with CO2 in the U.S. today? Well, we bottle Coke. We use it to make Coke products have a fizz. That's a tiny little market, or a little bit of dry ice for shipping things around, but those are tiny little markets. So we're trying to figure out, well, how do we turn it from being something that it's just a pain in the neck waste to something that's useful? But there's so much of it that probably what we're going to do is we're just going to pump it right back into the ground where it came from. So imagine you've got oil that's underground. You're going to bring it to the surface, burn it. The water is going to be in the atmosphere, and you're going to pump the carbon dioxide back into the ground.
I was actually going to ask if you could speak to more about what that process looks like of pumping CO2 back into the ground.
Yeah, so, so if you happen to be sitting on top of a site that's got the geology where you can put the oil, then you basically have to pressurize it, and there's a lot of characterization that you have to do to make sure that once you pump it underground, it won't leak. I mean, but you can imagine, this natural gas and oil have been underground at very high pressures for, millennia. So it's very possible to find spots that will be in there and stay there. So they do a lot of work to characterize that, but basically you pressurize it and you pump it underground. On the other hand, if you don't have a good location, then you got to build a pipeline, a CO2 pipeline. So the United States today, actually, we have over 1,000 miles of CO2 pipelines for moving CO2 around, mostly for what we call enhanced oil recovery. Basically, you build the pipeline and you use it to get more oil out of a well. You pressurize the well. This is actually a super contemporary topic right now because there's a big proposal in the state of Indiana. There's a lot of ethanol plants where they make biofuel from corn. It turns out that the cheapest and lowest cost, the first place for carbon capture will come from those plants. And so there's a plan, hey, let's build this pipeline. It connects all those ethanol plants, and then we'll ship it across North Dakota and we'll pump it underground. But the state of North Dakota has just said, we don't want your pipeline. So we'll see what happens with that.
So is there a future filling station with hydrogen in the pump for either commercial or residential vehicle that fills with hydrogen, and the only output from the car's exhaust is perhaps water?
Yeah, so that's what that is. So you can go to California today, and you can buy a fuel cell powered car, and there are hydrogen filling stations where you can fill your car. And the state of Georgia, Hyundai, you may have seen there's a big announcement. Hyundai is going to put in a huge new facility, and they're going to be manufacturing lots of different kinds of cars. Some will be internal combustion engines, but they intend to make a large tractor trailer truck that's powered by fuel cells. And that was our governor, Governor Kemp, actually has put out a request for information for these hydrogen refueling stations.
So is it a misnomer to think of hydrogen as a fuel being not safe? And, people have visions of, well, my car's filled with hydrogen. I'm driving the modern equivalent of the Hindenburg.
Yeah.
I mean, is that totally incorrect?
Well, okay. I mean, safety's a big deal. I run the largest university combustion research facility in the United States. We burn a lot of hydrogen, and I'll just tell you, we got to be super careful because hydrogen likes to go bang. But on the other hand, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Today we use natural gas. Natural gas also goes bang. You can just go Google it. You'll find lots of pictures of places where a house once was, and the house is no longer there because there was a leaky natural gas pipeline or something like that, or they left their stove on. So I mean, any kind of energy system you use, there's going to be a risk. Can we manage that risk? Absolutely, we can do it with hydrogen. It's a very solvable problem.
I think we have one more question.
So, do we believe that it would be a more viable thing to do something? I know that we've got like the cells that you can store a bunch of it in the car at one time, but we also have like the smaller scale cells that like you see being sold everywhere that makes it on demand. Do we think that it'd be more viable or safer to do just a cell, or would it be any way possible to make it as we go? When you say cell, you mean to make hydrogen? Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And, it's just about cost. So I think what's happening in the U.S. right now is that there's a lot of people trying to kickstart a hydrogen industry because right now hydrogen's expensive. It's more expensive than natural gas. So it's the natural gas or methane is the natural thing to compare because both are gases. And if you were to say what's the lowest cost way to get from point A to point B, you wouldn't use hydrogen. But on the other hand, 20 years ago, solar and wind were also more expensive as well. But today they're the least cost ways of getting electric power. And the reason for that is, for example, with a solar farm or a wind farm, is all the capital cost goes in up front. But once it's there, you're not paying for the sun. The sun's there. And so there's just no recurring fuel costs like you have for a natural gas power plant or something like that. And so what we're trying to do right now is say, okay, we know hydrogen's expensive. How do we kickstart this thing to drive the costs down? And there will probably be a mix of large industrial scale facilities that are making bulk hydrogen, but also smaller individual scale that is making it on demand, to your point.
We'll say, as I walk to the next question, Bartow County is kind of the interesting hub for energy because the largest solar cell plant is in Dalton, Q-Cell being
Yep.
built, and then the largest electric battery plant is being built just outside Bartow County towards Rome.
Yeah.
And if you've driven up that way, you can see the massive construction project going on with that.
So my question is smaller scale. So looking from a residential or things that we would see in the day-to-day or changes that we can make, where would you think that there's places that we can make a difference in being more net zero in our homes or in our communities? And where can we, as your audience, make the biggest impact?
Joey, turn your lights off when you leave the room. Bam, that's how you do it. Yeah, there's so many simple things. It's interesting because, again, it's a huge blessing. I mean, if you go like go study abroad and go to Europe and just your showers are getting timed and you start paying usage charges. Like I've had some friends go there and they have to like learn how to shorten their showers because their water bills, you know, you get like a minute and then after the first minute, you know, the price of your water goes up. And just because we just have so much, our energy is so ubiquitous and so inexpensive in our water that we don't even think about it. But yet what we're learning though is that even though it's so inexpensive and ubiquitous that we leave our lights on and we leave the door wide open when the air conditioner's running, that we're actually impacting our planet. And so I think, but there's a lot of things that we can do as individuals to reduce our, you know, again, shut the door when the air conditioner's on. Think about what temperature the air conditioner really needs to be. Turn your lights off. Those add up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lieuwen, and let's give a big hand to our speaker. If you have tickets to the 8 o'clock planetarium show, it's going to be happening in about 4 minutes across the Great Hall. And the observatory will be open tonight, so I hope you can go out and see it. It'll be open till 10 o'clock tonight.